My answer to HR was to resign and move on. I was in a writer's room trying to be creative while at the same time being surveilled by unknown critics who would snitch on me to a disembodied voice over the phone. My every word would be scrutinized. Sooner or later, I'd be fired or worse, silenced.
Nerderotic.com.
It's not unusual for there to be turmoil behind the set at Star Trek Discovery. Usually a writer is fired or a showrunner is fired, but in this case, a showrunner quit. What is unusual is this showrunner wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and it covers a couple of subjects that I cover here on the channel. It gives us some insight as to why Star Trek Discovery is the dumbest show on television, and it goes into freedom of expression and cancel culture. But before we get started, if you like what I do here, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. There have been some recent changes with YouTube, and while I get great traction with my subscribers, we just hit 120,000. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for that. What's been happening is YouTube isn't recommending my videos as much, and others as well. There are other YouTubers. So if you want to help out myself or your favorite YouTuber, please share and like the video as much as possible. I would appreciate it, and they would appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Let's get to the article. New York Times, Why I Quit the Writer's Room. The worst thing you can do to citizens of a democracy is silence them, by Walter Mosley. Mr. Mosley is a novelist and screenwriter, and it sounds like the only competent writer at Star Trek Discovery. And it sounds like the chaos that has been reported from behind the set since its earliest days is true. And I will preface this by saying I was pulled aside by somebody at Comic-Con this year who will remain nameless, and I can't give details, I'm sorry, but I can confirm that there was chaos on the set for season 2. This person no longer works. They admitted to me that they were the very definition of a disgruntled employee, but they also said they have been working in Hollywood for 3 decades, and this is the worst experience they've ever had in their life. Take that for what it's worth. And it's not the only person who pulled me aside. I was pulled aside quite a bit at Star Trek Las Vegas, and I was told pretty much the same thing. And I think it's evident what we get on screen. That's why it's so chaotic. That's why it really makes no sense. That's why it's the dumbest written show on television. And go watch it for yourself. If you want to go through that kind of pain, watch it for yourself. And if you think it's intelligent television, I am perfectly willing to get on a live stream anytime and we can debate this, and you can break down, you can give me 5 reasons why it's the most or why it's intelligent television at all and what I'm missing about it. I am completely open to that. Earlier this year, I had just finished with the Snowfall Writers Room for the season when I took a similar job on a different show at a different network. I'd been in the new room for a few weeks when I got the call from Human Resources. A pleasant-sounding young man said, "Mr. Mosley, it has been reported that you use the N-word in the writer's room." I replied, "I am the N-word in the writer's room." All right. Listen, I worked in Hollywood for a couple years, and it certainly is one of the most racist, sexist places I've ever worked. And I used to work in the auto industry. So, he said very nicely that I could not use that word except in a script. I could write it, but I could not say it. He, a man whose people in America have been, among other things, slandered by many words, but I could no longer use the particular word to describe the environs of my experience. Now that sounds similar to the David Chappelle story that he told in Sticks and Stones when he ran afoul of the alphabet people. I have to stop with the forward thrust of this story to say that I had indeed said the word in the room. I hadn't called anyone it. I just told a story about a cop who explained to me on the streets of Los Angeles that he stopped all N-words in a neighborhood and all P's in an N neighborhood because they were usually up to no good. I was telling a true story as I remembered it. Someone in the room, I have no idea who, called HR and said that my use of the word made them uncomfortable. And the HR representative called to inform me that such language was unacceptable to my employers. I couldn't use the word in common parlance even to express an experience I lived through. No, you can't say it. And this guy is obviously old school and he's a black man, but you just can't say it anywhere. There I was, a black man in America who shares with millions of others the history of racism and more often than not treated as subhuman. If addressed at all, that history had to be rendered in words my employers regarded as acceptable. There, I was being chastised for criticizing the word that oppressed me and mine for centuries. As far as I know, the word is in the dictionary. As far as I know, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence assure me of both the freedom of speech and the pursuit of happiness. I love this guy. I wish he would have stayed on Star Trek Discovery. He might actually have made it good. How can I exercise these freedoms when my place of employment tells me that my job is on the line if I say a word that makes somebody, an unknown person, uncomfortable? And that's insight into Alex Kurtzman's secret hideout and Star Trek Discovery that might explain why there is so much turmoil behind the set. Walter Mosley is a veteran of Hollywood. He certainly knows how to navigate the shark-infested waters. I've had my experiences there. I haven't seen so many people weeping openly since grade school while I was working at Technicolor. So that's a normal thing. But nowadays in Hollywood, it must be so much worse. And David Chappelle talked about this cancel culture, even within the workplace, where people can weaponize your mistakes to maybe get rid of some competition. There's all kinds of language that makes me uncomfortable. Half the utterances of my president, for instance. Some people's sexual habits and desires. But I have no right whatsoever to tell anyone what they should and should not cherish or express. I really like this guy. I really do. I think he would have been a great addition at Star Trek Discovery. And, well, hopefully they keep some of the stuff he's actually worked on. And I'm guessing that will probably be whatever good stuff we get. But they'll probably get rid of it because he left, and that's probably what was behind him leaving. He, like I said, he probably saw the writing on the wall. He's telling us as much as he can within this article, but I'm trying to read between the lines and see what else he's saying, and there is a lot there. A few years ago, when a group of my peers said that they supported outlawing the Confederate flag, I demurred. Don't get me wrong, I have no warm and fuzzy feelings about that flag, but I do know that all Americans have the right of self-expression. Also, if someone has that flag in their mind, I prefer to see it in their front porch too. That's kind of funny. And from his perspective. But I think he's old school enough to understand that that flag means different things to different people. We'll just say that. All right. I do not believe that it should be the object of our political culture to silence those things said that make some people uncomfortable. Of course, I'm not talking about verbal attacks or harassment, and neither am I, by the way. But if I have an opinion, a history, a word that explains better than anything now I feel, then I also have the right to express that feeling or word without the threat of losing my job. And furthermore, I do not believe that this is the province of HR to make the decision to keep my accuser's identity secret. Snitches. And, you know, we say here at Nerdrotic, snitches end up with, well, be nice, stitches. If I've said or done something bad enough to accuse people to fear me, they should call the police. Absolutely agree. And this is where this whole zero tolerance thing we're doing with HR these days is creating such bad environments in a workplace. God, I spent an entire day filling out HR paperwork at Technicolor. Back in the past, when I worked for giant corporations, it would be an hour, hour and a half. This was an entire 8-hour day. Now, anonymity is important for some instances, but if it's just an accusation of a word or a word making you uncomfortable, I certainly think you can face your accuser on that one, but this certainly explains a lot, and maybe it explains why Star Trek Discovery can't get good science fiction writers or people who have Star Trek knowledge because maybe they refuse to work there. I would like to point out that these two writers that you are seeing right here, not saying that they're the guilty parties, but they have survived all the turmoil. They have been there from the very beginning. And they are certainly guilty of writing some of the worst episodes of Star Trek Discovery because there are varying degrees of bad. My answer to HR was to resign and move on. I was in a writer's room trying to be creative while at the same time being surveilled by unknown critics who would snitch on me to a disembodied voice over the phone. My every word would be scrutinized. Sooner or later, I'd be fired or worse, silenced. Walter Mosley gets it. And we talked about this in Dave Chappelle. And what happened earlier this week that I won't mention, the cancel culture is starting to come to the forefront of the news. More and more people are talking about it. More and more people are seeing where this political correct culture, this language police culture is getting us. And while some language is okay, some isn't. And even for this black man to speak it, they're saying he can't, even when he's just telling a story of what somebody said decades ago, which he has every right to say. Again, personal decision. I wouldn't say it, but he has every right to say it. I'm a fortunate guy. Not everyone can quit their job, but beyond that, we cannot be expected to thrive in a culture where our every word is monitored. That's the weird part. And I don't know if that's Kurtzman culture, secret hideout culture, bad robot culture, Michelle Paradise culture, or CBS culture, or maybe D, all of the above. If my words physically threatened or bullied someone, something must be done about it. But if you tell me that you feel uncomfortable at some word I utter, then let me say this. There was a time in America when so-called white people were uncomfortable to have a black person sitting next to them. There was a time when people felt uncomfortable when women demanded the right to vote. There was a time when sexual orientation had only one meaning and everything else was a crime. The worst thing you can do to citizens of a democratic nation is to silence them. And the easiest way to silence a woman or a man is to threaten his or her livelihood. Let's not accept the McCarthyism of secret condemnation. Instead, let's delve a little deeper, limiting the power that can be exerted over our citizens, their attempts to express their hearts and horrors, and their desire to speak their truths. Only this can open the dialogue of change. The importance of Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones special cannot be understated. And while this article had nothing to do with it, it sure was a coincidence, and it continues the conversation. This man was just telling a story. He was passing on some wisdom, and instead of listening, somebody decided to weaponize it and use it to get him in trouble and probably get him fired. So him quitting is giving that person what they wanted, and that is the culture of Hollywood. Snitch, punk culture. And that explains why there is so much garbage coming out of Hollywood, and in particular, the infection that is Star Trek Discovery. It certainly explains that. Until next time, everybody have a great day. Again, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Nerderotic.com. Please subscribe.